The biggest innovations to have come from OSU in recent years is the Neurobridge research. Through an exemplary partnership with Patel, our next speaker is changing the outcomes for patients who previously had no hope. Please help me welcome to the BRUTx stage Dr. Jerry Mysiw.
Thank you for this opportunity. A little bit of context about my background. I'm a physiatrist. My subspecialty is neurorehabilitation. For the past 30 years of my career, both clinically and in clinical research, I have focused on decreasing the complications after spinal cord injury and after traumatic brain injury. I'm going to describe a device that in my career I never expected to see, and I certainly never expected to have the opportunity to be part of its development. We developed and we successfully tested a neural prosthesis, a device that bypasses a damaged spinal cord. And it allows a gentleman who is completely paralyzed from a neck injury to move his right arm for the first time in 5 years. Importantly, this neural prosthesis is a brain-machine interface. That means that his own cortical activity is controlling this device. It's the first time that a brain-machine interface has successfully powered the paralyzed limb of a human. I'm going to show you a brief video of what this looks like. This is one of the first functional activities that he was able to demonstrate after the device was turned on. And we just blew right past that slide. Can you go back one slide? Oh, there it is. What you're seeing is that he is capable of pouring a drink and taking a drink. That might seem like much ado about nothing, but when you're completely paralyzed, you have to understand that that person is totally dependent. They need help getting out of bed. They need help washing, grooming. They have to be fed. To now be able to pour your own drink and take a drink is functionally very meaningful to these individuals. Now the component is complicated. It involves a sensor over the motor cortex that then forwards that information to a computer that has to interpret that cortical activity. That information is then sent to a stimulator. That stimulator then controls 200 electrodes wrapped in a sleeve around the forearm. The sequence of those stimulations, the duration of those stimulations then determines the nature of that functional activity. Now, each one of these components had to be either developed or substantially modified by our team. The sensor, commercially available, but as you can see, it's tiny. In addition, this sensor has to be placed over the motor cortex. Now, the problem is that everybody's brain is a little bit different. We have to be certain that where we place this chip, this sensor, is exactly over that part of the motor cortex that controls the hand and the forearm. To do that, we put him in an fMRI scanner before surgery. And we had him watch videos of different hand and arm motions. Then we asked him to conceptualize that he was actually performing those activities. That fMRI hotspot is where we placed the electrode. Then, 4 weeks later, we held our breath. We turned the device on after all the swelling and blood products had dissipated. And fortunately, our placement was good. But then we had to train the computer to understand the meaning of all this cortical activity. The way we did that, we had him, again, watch a video of a different movement. Then we asked him, you conceptualize that you're actually performing this movement. After several trials, we then turned on the stimulator to see if the computer actually interpreted that cortical activity correctly. After a lot of trials, a lot of hours, he has learned to do a number of different types of functional activities, some of which aren't necessarily that functional, but nevertheless. It's indicative of the fact that he was able to achieve enough fine motor control that he could do Guitar Hero.
Nice.
Now, we believe that this is, in fact, a breakthrough innovation. A couple of reasons. Again, this is the first time that a brain-machine interface has successfully controlled the limb of a paralyzed human. Number two, what we've seen is that the research agenda for the different people in this field is starting to change based on this breakthrough. And number 3, the letters. Shortly after this breakthrough was announced, and there was a press release, we started to get letters from around the world. Some of these letters were hard to read. They were, you could just hear the sadness. You could hear the sense of loss in these letters. But one recurring theme was there was gratitude. There was gratitude that we gave these individuals for the first time some meaningful hope. Hope that their nightmare of being trapped in bodies that do not serve them could actually someday be diminished, even if slightly. So those letters, on the other hand, were sad and powerful, but they certainly made getting up in the morning and getting to work a lot easier. We could not have achieved this actually without a very significant collaboration between 2 institutions, Ohio State University and Battelle. Curiously, Battelle is a research institute, a non-for-profit, and it's here its headquarters is here in Columbus. And curiously, their headquarters is only several hundred yards from my office, and yet we never knew that at these 2 institutions were investigators that were in this field for decades. About 4 years ago, we actually started to collaborate together. And then over time, we pulled together some very talented people from both institutions to make this happen. Without people in each of these disciplines making very significant contributions, we would not have been successful. About a year after we turned the device on, we had a celebration with a birthday cake. This was at Battelle. And a number of people were coming up to me and introducing themselves to me. I never met these people. I had no idea who they were, but they were telling me what component of all this they invented, what they helped to improve. They were showing me prototypes for the next generation of devices. And the pride and the selflessness in their voices was powerful. It actually reminded me of the story of John Kennedy touring NASA. And he saw a gentleman pushing the broom, and he asked him, "Sir, what is your responsibility here?" And this gentleman replied, "I'm here to help put a man on the moon." I don't know if that story is true, but it's a great story. And it's certainly a clarity of purpose, a similar clarity of purpose that our collaborative group was able to achieve and still maintains. Still, in this era of limited funding, we could not have been successful without the support of our respective institutions. Our institutions believed in these teams. They decided that we were going to be a source of, in essence, an innovation engine. That what they were hoping is that this innovation would actually drive more invention, more discovery, and then, yet again, more innovation, and that eventually we would have a product out there that would change lives. This is not the traditional model for innovation where it typically follows research and discovery. But still, this model does in fact seem to be working. Certainly we're seeing it at our respective institutions with more and newer prototypes, but also what's happening in other institutions. People who are competitors are also interested in this field. We can see some of the incredible changes and new devices that they are developing. This project is extremely expensive, and it also involves considerable risk to the subject. In an era where healthcare costs are about 17% of GDP, where we're totally restructuring our healthcare system because our model is not sustainable, is it reasonable to develop a device that will be likely prohibitively expensive, and that may be so expensive that the people who need it may not be able to afford it? Well, the short answer to that is, I don't know. But I can hope that as we move forward, that the costs will decrease. And we also have to take into consideration that when you've had a spinal cord injury, certainly a quadriplegic, your health care expenditures over the course of a lifetime increase by about $2 to $3 million, largely because you're addressing the complications of immobility. So hopefully, devices such as this will decrease those complications and actually decrease the health care expenditures over time. The other issue, how much risk is reasonable? Normally, when you ask somebody to participate in a research project that involves considerable risk, the alternative is death, or the alternative is a natural progression of the disease and horrible outcomes. In this case, this gentleman's stable. He has roughly a 30-year life expectancy. He has created a new life. He's a college student. He has a van that allows him the ability to drive himself wherever he chooses. He's a high school lacrosse coach. So, after he agreed to participate, I went through all the consent forms, and he had signed them. I paused and I asked him, do you realize that you have consented to 2 neurosurgical procedures you don't need, and that these carry considerable risks, so that the first night after each neurosurgical procedure, you will have to spend at least 1 night in the intensive care unit? Why? He gave me 2 answers. First, we gave him an opportunity, and he felt an obligation to all of his brothers and sisters out there who have similar injuries, that their life is so difficult, and he owed it to them to help improve everybody's life. Number 2, he said he wanted to be able to scratch his nose. He wanted to be able to brush his teeth. Such mundane, simple activity that we take for granted, but to them is meaningful, very meaningful. And that gives you clarity. That helps you understand again how hard their life is. And that helps keep us moving forward. Thank you.